6 on BBC Radio Wales Breakfast. Tom Phipps with you this morning. So we're asking what you would like to see the police doing in your area in 2020. Maybe you want more money spent on tackling knife crime. Maybe you've been a victim of a cyber crime, or maybe it's something to do with drugs, because that's one of the things that was in the news quite a lot last year. County lines drugs gangs have really been on the rise, particularly in some rural parts of Wales. The National Crime Agency has said there are more than 100 gangs operating in towns across Wales. Mike Roberts is the former Chief Inspector who's worked on tackling county lines crime. Good morning, Mike. Can you just explain what county lines are, firstly?
Thanks very much for having me on, Tom, to talk about this. Basically, a county line is where an urban drugs gangs are selling drugs into rural towns. That could be a seaside town, or it could be a small village somewhere in mid-Wales, which is the latest case Dyfed Powys have dealt with.
And presumably this it fuels all sorts of crime, doesn't it? Because if you have these gangs coming in, I'm guessing that they bring violence and all sorts of trouble with them.
Well, first of all, the people they're using to courier the drugs are usually young people. So we're talking about modern-day slavery offences there, grooming. And then when they operate in those areas we're talking about, they establish a forward operating base, usually targeting a vulnerable person, taking over their home and selling the drugs out from that house, and also then using those people to courier the drugs and take all the risks. So the people higher up the food chain are the ones that don't get arrested.
We know that in some areas it's brought a lot of antisocial behaviour as well, because the drugs are being supplied onto the streets in areas like Llanelli. People have complained about that side of it. What can the police do? What will be the strategy to try and tackle these gangs that are coming in?
The police have got a really big toolbox of strategies, but the basic is community policing. Because if people in a local area have got faith in the police and will supply them with the intelligence, the police can then act on it, backed up by technology like ANPR, CCTV, DNA. So it's about that first basic of policing, which is neighbourhood policing, making sure that's good and robust, and then building on all your investigative strategies on the back of that.
And I suppose that's something that the police forces will argue has been quite difficult for them with the cuts over the last few years, that kind of basic neighbourhood policing. Do you think the cuts have affected how police are tackling these drugs gangs?
I think if you've not got the feet on the ground, if you've not got the confidence of the community, yes, you do run into those issues. But what we've got to remember is police are tackling drugs as a priority. These county lines are one of the highest priorities for the police because it does involve grooming, targeting young people, targeting vulnerable people. So it is a priority. So the police have had to manage cuts, but it's about establishing what are your hierarchy of priorities and targeting these type of offences.
And for you, just finally, was it, I suppose you've always got to be one step ahead of the criminals. That must be quite difficult. But as a former Chief Inspector who was working on this, how did you find it?
Well, what I've now done is established a small charity that works to prevent young people getting groomed into it. So that is the basic response, really. What can we do at a neighbourhood level to get the community to supply us the intelligence? What can we do to stop young people getting groomed into these offences? So sort of my legacy that I'm trying to build on from my enforcement is actually to make sure we get a really good targeted prevention work.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time, Mike Roberts, who used to work on tackling county lines. We're talking today